Answers with Dr. Reju is a platform where we take a more in-depth and intentional look into various life issues and bring clarification so we can navigate our way through with knowledge. Join us on Patrice Radio as we take this journey to discovery. Do remember to follow, like, and engage us on Instagram at Patrice_radio and also on YouTube via Patrice Radio Live. Thank you.
A better Nigeria, is it a myth or do we keep hoping? This is Answers with Dr. Reju.
Good evening and welcome to Answers with Dr. Reju, where critical life issues are clarified. My name is Lois and I'm here with a full house today. You're welcome everybody to the show. Agnes, Scouty, Israel, Joseph, John and Joseph, you're all welcome to the house today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, Dr. Reju, the Chief Resource Person of the Center for Transformational Leadership, CTL, Jos. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Lois. Glad to be here. Hi, guys.
Hi. We're glad to have you today on the show, sir. And today, we'll be talking about reclaiming the African identity, the extinction of African languages. So that we don't throw a blanket over it. So, what is language and the difference between language and dialect?
Wow, that's an academic exercise. That's a very academic question. Language and dialect. Wow. Well, when you say something is dialectic, it means a means of communication between a particular group of people that they share the same ways of life, they share the same. Language is also kind of, connected to that, but it starts from what is spoken, and then it ends in actual, lifestyle, practices, habits, rituals, and all those kind of things. So language is more of what sort of define or summarize people's identity, It's, sometimes you call it, that's the mother tongue or father tongue, if you want to be gender sensitive. So I don't want us to be too academic about that, right? Because as faces are many in this, in this studio this afternoon, so are the tongues, are different. So, but we know exactly what we're talking about. When we say language, the fact remains that colonization and today's civilization, it's not been kind to African languages, especially in Nigeria. It's like when you speak in your dialect now, your dialect, and then the music that was played before we came on air, is one that was done by Jeremiah Gang, right? In his native dialect, which is Birom, right?
Yeah.
Now, you discover that is unique to Birom people. I don't have a clue what he was talking about. But we both live in Jos. We are both Nigerians. But as a language we can speak in Nigeria, that so language unites. If I speak English, which is what we call our lingua, we got that phrase, from French, lingua franca, which is the general language spoken by everybody, then it unites. So language is that, is that medium of unity that makes us live together. Because if we can't understand ourselves, then we can't live together. So language is that medium. Is that medium. It's the sound that says we are all on the same page. So that's language. Dialect is more kind of, unique, homogeneous to a smaller set of people.
Okay.
Did I?
Yes, sir.
You guys understand what okay, good.
Okay, so I was having a conversation with someone, and I was talking about importance of language, and he went on like he doesn't see the importance of he's an Igbo, so he's like he doesn't see the importance of that to him because he doesn't see how it actually helps him in his career or his life or moving forward and stuff like that. So So I want us to establish the importance of language.
You know, that person spoke like that again because there's a particular language that has been used to orientate him. You know, and that language is now what, because his response to you, or maybe her response to you, was communicated via a language, right? And he has, maybe unknown to him, the language that was used to raise him has in the same breath devalued his own native tongue. So he doesn't see the need for it any longer. And you know, I was having a conversation with you guys also before this program that the moment you lose your language, you have actually lost yourself. You know, you've actually lost yourself. That's why you see that one basic means of colonization is language. The way people spread any ideology is through language. The way, you know, Islam was spread was through language. Same for Christianity. So when someone says, I don't see the relevance of my language in the pursuit of my career, how will that person see it? When maybe you study history in school, you study, you know, medicine, you study philosophy, it was communicated via a particular language. And that's the language that creates your, you know, your reality. Is the language you speak, is what gives you, you know, if somebody speaks good English in Nigeria, you kind of have a respect for that person, right? Because that's the language we respect. If somebody speaks English and is having grammatical errors, you can't pass an interview. You will be failed in WAEC and all those kind of things. So, you know, that person spoke that way. Unknown to him or her, he has been orientated, right, to elevate maybe the English language that he is now using to pursue his career over the Igbo dialect or the Igbo language, because Igbo is not really a dialect, it's a language, you know, over the Igbo language that is his own native language. It will have been the same thing if the Igbo language has been used to communicate physics, communicate biology. So that's he's a victim of what we are talking about in the, you know, on this program. That person who said, I don't have, you know, because if you're in Germany, you are taught in Germany. I mean, you are taught in German. You are taught in what they call the Hochdeutsch. So you cannot say, I don't see the relevance. There is no relevance now between engineering career and Igbo language. So the guy is right. But we are saying that that's not the way it ought to be. Right? That's not the way it ought to be. Because it makes us live double lives. So you have a life in school, and you have a life on the street, and you have a life at home. You have a life. So it's something. The whole purpose of what we are discussing here is that we need to reclaim it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. There's this narrative in line with what you just said. Now, there's this narrative that when the world was speaking one language, it was better. The people were more united, and you allude to the fact that when we speak a general language, there's unity.
Yeah.
And some say that it is it's disadvantageous. Yeah, for nations like, or countries like Nigeria that have so many languages. And then looking at this Singapore as a case study now, that the prime minister had to force a language on them, but he told them, we're using this one as for trade, and then let's keep our local languages for identity.
Absolutely.
So how can we use this case study now to use it to solve our own problem here?
It's, you know, again, you know, when we compare or use the Singapore model, we have to be careful, so that we don't do copy and paste, right? The principle is right. That principle is correct. You know that, because it's very intentional. We are going to use English for trade, so we already know the purpose.
Yeah.
Because everyone that introduced any kind of language, there is a purpose. And now that man was, you know, in his wisdom, he was able to define that. But you see, ours happen in a haphazard way for majority of the people. But those who, you know, who are the founders or the promoters of the ideology knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing because the purpose was to dominate. The purpose was to colonize. So if the nation has, if there's a consensus of opinion that we're going to use this language for this, then we have defined language. That means you can't speak the language that we have for trade in school, right? One of the major, flashpoints of the struggle in apartheid, right, was that in South Africa, if you go to Joburg, there's a particular, memorial site dedicated. I forgot the name of the guy. I think it's Trevor or something, or I forgot the name of the guy. The biggest riot that happened during the apartheid was by secondary school boys and girls who said they don't want to be taught in Afrikaans. They want to be taught in Zulu. They want to be taught in Xhosa, right? So language is very, very important, because the way the Dutch, brought the apartheid was to impose Afrikaans on everybody, So it's so important. So they wanted, okay, let's speak Afrikaans in a particular setting. When it comes to education, we don't want to lose ourselves, because the moment you begin to use Afrikaans to educate, naturally, is going to kill the local languages. So, Lee Kuan Yew was wise, because he had good intentions. He wasn't trying to dominate anybody. He wanted to have a Singaporean identity. So, but how many leaders do that today? So you realize that, I remember the first time somebody introduced a Hausa person to me. Hausa. When you hear Hausa, and if you are like me that grew up in the South, you are seeing everybody from across the Niger. Once you are across the Niger, you are Hausa. But people don't know that Hausa is a tribe. Hausa is not even synonymous with Islam. Yeah, it's not. So majority of Hausas, many of them, the language is still here, but the real Hausa people, they are very few. But the language was used, for an agenda. So that's how powerful, language is. And the example you used, that was an intentionality behind it. That we want to use this because this is a language we are going to use to communicate with the world. What we'll have done in Nigeria was, okay, we got the English from our colonial masters. Let's use it to communicate with the world. But if you are going to live in the South, let's have a language. If you are going to live in the East, let's have a language. If you are going to live in the Middle Belt, let's have a language. We didn't have that kind of, well-structured, intentional, kind of plan. So things were just kind of happening. Someone said, if Ahmadu Bello wants to talk to his political proteges, he speaks Hausa. Right? And when Awolowo wants to talk to his political proteges, he speaks English.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why you discover that most of the Hausa people too, that are politicians there, they speak English. Right? But you discover that those, for example, it's not all those who followed Awolowo were Yorubas. So he didn't speak Yoruba to them. He spoke English. Because in that same room, you have someone like Ambrose Ali, who is from Benin. Yeah. You have maybe like Baba Tokpe, who is a Yoruba. So he used English to unite them.
True.
Ahmadu Bello used Hausa to also unite. Right? But you see, that killed both the indigenous languages here. When I got to Jos in 1997, that was the first time I heard that anything called Birom. If you say Birom in the Southwest, nobody knows. If you are from Plateau State, as far as somebody that lives in Ibadan, because you are Hausa. You see, that's how powerful language is. Many don't even know that Hausa is a language.
Yeah.
It's a person.
That's right.
It's a person. So these are the things that we have to understand. And my own concern is that because of this use of language, our local languages have not evolved. They've not developed. You can't use it to capture. You can't use it to work. Look at the way that there are alphabets, of Chinese on every phone device. On every phone device. It's so limited. You can only have maybe the three major, I don't think there's a keyboard. If you're going to use the keyboard of a computer to type in Yoruba, the marks won't be there. And it's the signs, I call it marks, right? Signs. It's the signs that actually makes it have meaning. Because if there's no signs on it, because of the uniqueness of that language, OWO can mean 1,001 things. OWO can be hand, it can be money, it can be broom, it can be respect. Can you imagine? OWO. It can mean 1,001 things. But the moment you put the mark, you know exactly what you're talking about. And that's how beautiful the language is.
Well, okay, so when a child can't speak his or her dialect, whose fault is it?
It's obvious. The one the child is speaking, who taught him or her? It's the parents, right? It's the parents. So, I mean, we speak. What we speak is just what we hear from our surrounding. Yeah, that's how we pick accent. That's how we're able to, kids basically sort of echo. I mean, if you give birth to a child and it comes on and starts speaking French to you, or speaking a strange language to you, then you know that it no longer stays with you. So, I mean, it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And so you don't teach language in a very formal way. Just speak before the child, and the child just cannot pick it up. I remember my little girl, when she came back from school, she started having the way she pronounced some words were kind of, the way Igbos pronounce it, because the teacher was Igbo. Yeah, she started picking the Igbo accent, and she will correct you that that's not the way my teacher, and the way kids are. They believe in the authority of the teacher over that of those of their parents. So it's kids speak the language that they hear around. So you see a young child grew up in the UK. They speak the Nigerian English at home, but because he or she spends more time in school, she will pick the English accent. So those are the kind of ways that language is developed.
Oh, okay, sir. Do you think there's a way the Nigerian education system can reach out to children and teach them how to embrace their language? Because keeping in mind that Nigeria is very diverse, so it's going to be very difficult Okay. Do you think the system should be to teach children in the 3 basic languages in Nigeria?
Yeah. It's very important. It's critically important. Because we're talking about identity. Now what we do, we are paying lip service to it. We've tried to do something about NYC. We've done excursions. I remember when my kids were in high school, if you are Yoruba, you have to register for Igbo. You have to, it shouldn't stop at you understanding the language. I remember there's a Professor Sophie, she's late now, Professor Sophie Oluwole or something. She's a professor of philosophy from University of Lagos. She was actually on the forefront of advocating that every subject should be taught in Nigerian language. Every subject. But that has to start with policy, and then goes into research, right? Our linguists need to go to work, and then training, and that has to be factored now into teacher training, into parenting. It has to be a total, that's a massive, because there are some schools here in the north where they don't teach in English. But it's so limited. It's so limited because you teach someone all the subjects in Hausa, right? But when he's going to write WAEC, he's going to write in English. So that's why I said it has to be policy. If Nigeria is a nation that's actually developing, by now, we should have outgrown WAEC or determined WAEC. That's what we try to do with NECO, but NECO is still playing second fiddle to WAEC. So those are the kind of things we've not been able to, have well-intended, clear thought leaders who can actually look at our identity. So there are a lot of things that are just be so haphazard in this country. That's why it's not impossible. But if we are going to do it now, we are going to start from negative, right? And then run against time to be able to come to a point where it can be Because now if you go study in China, the first thing you want to study is their language. If you go and play football as a Nigerian in Italy, you have to study the language because you won't be able to communicate. Many coaches have, they've crossed countries, they couldn't succeed because of language. Yeah. So there's a way you want to give your team a game plan. If you don't speak their language, you won't be able to, even if you have a good idea. So we are way, way thousands of miles behind, because what we still do now is to just study Igbo, and then you write it in WAEC and all those kind of things. And many times nobody even monitor the grade. And then what is the ultimate intention? Because for me, every educational policy or curriculum should be tied to a national vision. Right. It should be tied to, because what we need in this country is not just technology. We need relevant technology. So if someone is going to school, it must be tied to a national vision. So direct traffic to people studying this language because there's something we want to do, with it. But we don't have any kind of plan. There is no plan, absolutely none. And we are thousands of miles behind. But I think it's necessary. It's necessary if we are going to become an active player, in the global field, socially, economically, politically. We need our language.
Okay, so talking about what you just mentioned about using the native languages to teach children.
Yeah. Subjects.
Yes.
Yeah.
What will happen if, for instance, let's say an Igbo family decides to come to a Yoruba environment, and then in that environment, in that school, they teach in Yoruba.
Yeah.
So this child would have to start learning.
I just gave you an example. If you get a scholarship or whatever to send your kid to a university in Germany, you learn the language. So count the cost. It's the first thing you do if you cross culture. And it's always an addition. Right? It's an upgrade. If I speak all the languages in Nigeria, right, I am more marketable. So don't look at it as a problem. If an Igbo man speaks Yoruba or speaks Hausa, it's a plus. Most of the Igbos here, because they came here for trade, they all speak Hausa. Many of them speak Hausa. And they have their own Igbo, So that's an addition. Because there are some jobs you want to have. In fact, there is a whole field before the advent of computers when one of the most prized professions was being a secretary. Now, if you are a bilingual secretary, you are on a higher level. That is, you speak two languages. You are much sought. You are highly prized if you are a bilingual secretary. So today, if you are still a bilingual person, right? I remember there was a guy who worked together in the bank, where I work. He studied in Germany. He was working in the bank. There was a day, if it's today, the guy will name his price. Some Germans came to the bank to transact business, and he's the only one who could talk to them. So we had to go and look for Mr. Williams, I remember his name, to come and interact with these guys. But he just did it for free. But today, I'm very sure he won't do it for free. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Reclaiming the African identity, especially our languages. And then we're talking about education with the three basic languages of Nigeria.
Yeah.
So don't you think that there's going to be a marginalization, especially for the other local languages? Nigerian is a very broad nation with diverse languages. So wouldn't the Bureau man decide to say, no, they have to inculcate my own tribe?
Very, very good question. Now, that's a good question because of what Joseph said, right, about what happened in Singapore. If leaders are trusted, right, if leaders earn the trust, the fears of marginalization disappears. Yeah. Because why is it that you want to have the language? It's either for social benefit, it's either for economic benefit, for political benefit. One of those things are assured, regardless of the language, we all buy in. But because leaders are not trusted, right? Because we can say, how did we agree that we're going to be speaking English? It was forced on us. It was forced on us, right? But if the leader will not force it, if the leader will cast a vision, if the leader will say, this is what we want to do with this language, if the leader will come with the right mode of communication. I gave an example, last week that in South Africa, they have 11 official languages. 11 official languages in South Africa. 11. That is recognized. Now, that's because of their history of apartheid. Everybody wants to, find themselves. And that again tells us the importance of language. When someone's language is respected, the person feels you respect me. But if you go to South Africa, depending on where you are, it determines the kind of language you want to communicate in. But when the president is going to address the nation, he speaks in English. And everybody agrees. And there are times also when the guy might speak in Zulu, depending on where the person is. So it's a very real concern because of how multilingual or multidialectical that we are in Nigeria. It's a concern. But see, if a leader will come who will refuse to be Hausa, who will not be Yoruba, who will not be Muslim, who will not be Christian, who will respect every shade of opinion, of culture, of language, and harmonize, we're still going to have like a consensus. So the reason people feel marginalization is for economic, social, political kind of reasons. Once those things are assured, right, everybody's going to be fine. But it's a very good question. But leadership is about embracing challenges. Once you embrace that challenge and you can, reach out to all the shades of opinion, reach out to all the languages and all those kind of things. And it's as simple as pick someone from that culture and give the person maybe a position. Everybody, okay, our son, our daughter is there. So those are the kind of thing. But we want to, we believe that we can be as tall as the other person is short. Mm-hmm. Then that's a problem. That's a problem.
Okay, we've been able to establish the fact that language is important. Language is very, very important. And of course, we need to reclaim our identity as regards, our African languages. This is how far we can go on the program today. I hope you learned. Yes, I hope you learned. I hope you enjoyed yourself because I learned a lot today. Thank you very much for, staying with us in the studios today, guys. Thank you so much, sir, for, coming to the studio today. Thank you for answering the questions. For me, I had a lot of questions, and I kept, as they kept coming, kept answering them, and I was like,
Yeah, I wish we would have done this in the Nigerian language.
Wow.
This episode.
It has to definitely be a language that every one of us understands.
That would be outside, and so you won't be able to answer.
That's yeah.
No, I'll use Google Translate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We have come to the end of the program for today. Don't forget to tune in next week for another exciting episode. Thanks for listening.